So Amanda, you are the Senior Director of Student Transitions and Success at the University of Washington, Tacoma. You hold a Bachelor of Science in Biological Sciences and a Master of Science in Aquatic and Fisheries Science, both from the University of Washington. And for 7 years, your work was all about identifying marine worms, mapping sex chromosomes in 3-spine stickback fish. Stickleback, I'm not the scientist, obviously. And exploring the biological impacts of chemicals and plastics. But over the past 9 years, your work is centered on advocating for equity in education, creating bridges between educational institutions and communities, and supporting young people in developing and attaining big dreams. What led you to transition from those applied scientists into the work you're doing now?
Well, it really did come down to some experiences that I had in graduate school. I would say it's experiences I had over my entire lifetime that led to a different career path or a complementary career path. So you mentioned I have a master's degree in fishery and aquatic sciences from the University of Washington, which is one of the most prestigious programs in the country for fish biology. And going into that, it still surprises me that I have that master's degree because I am a first-generation college student. So no one in my family had been to college. Thank you, baby. I appreciate that. And so it was very unusual for me to make that decision to go to graduate school because at that time, neither my husband at the time or my parents were very supportive of that decision. I had a great job at the Fred Hutchinson Cancer Research Center. I had a retirement plan. I had a good salary. I had benefits. And yet I felt called to learn more and to do more. And I thought, I can do more. I can earn a graduate degree. I understand the pathways and the doorways that it might open for me. But they weren't supportive, and it was very unusual for me to go beyond their wisdom and choose to pursue a graduate degree. But a few weeks, like 2 weeks after I'd started my program, I was on a plane headed to Kansas City with some other graduate students who were in different programs, and I was headed to a conference I'd never been to before, a conference called SOCNIS, which is Society for the Advancement of Hispanics, Chicanos, and Native Americans in the Sciences. And I had been to scientific conferences before. I had been to big national conferences, I'd been to local conferences, I'd been to local seminars. So I thought I knew the flow, and I thought I knew kind of how that goes. But that experience completely blew open my concept of what science is and the ways that we can show up as leaders in science. And in fact, preparing for this, I went back and I found my 2007 program from when I went, and the theme of the conference was stretching the imagination for leadership and sustainability. And I thought, wow, that's an educator's dream. Like, your theme is the impact that it has on the people who attend. But I had met in my lifetime maybe 10 different scientists of color, maybe 10. And I was in Kansas City, and I was in a hotel conference room space with 4,000 Native American and Latinx scientists and students, folks all the way from undergraduate degrees, all the way through folks who were directing parts of the National Science Foundation, and it blew me away. And they opened the conference with a blessing from one of the local tribal leaders. I had never seen that happen at a scientific conference before. And then they had cultural dances, and then they had music, all alongside of this really wonderful, rigorous science discussions and research. And I thought, this is how you do science? Can they do this? They're doing this. And then the keynote spoke, and it was Dr. Rochelle Gutierrez, who has a doctorate in mathematics. And she not only talked about her professional experiences and the importance of leadership from communities of color, by communities of color, but she also talked about mestiza consciousness, and she talked about this concept from the indigenous Nahuatl people of Mexico called Napantla, which in their language is a sense of in-betweenness. They had a word for it. And in this sense of in-betweenness, it developed for them after the Spanish conquistadors came and perpetuated genocide and cultural genocide. And then the next generation grew up and they were a mixture of different colors, of different cultures. This really spoke to me because I'm mixed race. My dad is German American, my mom is Mexican American, and I'm a white passing Latina. And I had always struggled with this sense of in-betweenness and feeling like it was wrong. And I had never heard someone actually talk about that as a strength, as something beautiful, as something that was going to help me survive and thrive in always changing experiences. And it was so powerful. Right, I'm with all of these graduate students who I assume are all smarter than me because I just got in my program and I'm at this national conference. And it was so powerful, I had to get up and I had to walk away from the table. And I just kept finding connections like that through the rest of the weekend. I felt heard, I felt seen, I felt understood, and I learned that I wasn't the only one who was there who had had those kinds of experiences, because not only were there other folks who came from different cultural backgrounds who talked about bridging between the different cultures of their families, they also talked about bridging between your home life and academia. So being the first one in your family and having to translate, not being too smart, not being too academic, right? And just trying to meet the expectations of where you were. That really resonated with me because the wisdom in my family up to that point had been about assimilation. It had been about, this is the right way, this is the Western way, and this is the way that you should be doing things, because that's how you survive, that's how you thrive, that's how you succeed. And we made a pact, all the students that had gone to that conference made a pact that we were going to bring that sense of community, that sense of power, that sense of belonging back to the Seattle campus. Well, okay, sure. I had never been an advocate before. I had lived by my family's wisdom of assimilation. And so I was in the airport on the way home, and I was sitting on the floor, I was waiting for my flight to be called, and I had my laptop open because the first thing I wanted to do was send an email to my graduate advisor and to say, I had this experience, right, this prestigious program that just let me in. Let me tell you all the things you're doing wrong and how I can help you fix it. That's gonna go over well. But I wrote the email, and then I read it, and then I reread it, and I rewrote it, and I deleted a bunch, and I rewrote it again, and eventually they called my flight. So I had to go, and I hit send. And I knew that going back into my life, I was going to have to make waves. I was gonna create change because I had never felt something so powerful before. And it was not an easy transition. My program was great, my advisor was great. But even in my family life, my husband thought the more that I embraced being mixed, of embracing both my Mexican heritage and my German American heritage, that the more I did that, the less space there was for him. And eventually my marriage did not survive that. Yep. Bye. And then even within my own family, they just didn't know anyone who had looked like me, who had gone to science, who had gone to higher education. They didn't believe in even in the potential of the cultures that they came from. Until they met my friends, who are all amazing, and they really started to see the kind of impact and the kind of leadership that we can have. And what really brought it home for me about how I was committed to doing this work differently was about 9 months after the conference, we were invited out to a small high school in Eastern Washington called Royal City. And the Sauconist group, who had gone to that conference and come back and launched this student chapter and was advocating with leadership within UW, we hosted an outreach event for students. And we talked about our personal experiences. We talked about the science that we're doing, what graduate school is, why we chose to go. And because we came from Indigenous, Pacific Islander, and Native American and Mexican backgrounds, we also knew that we needed a family portion. So we invited the families to come in the evening. So like during the day, one of the things we taught the students to do is how to isolate strawberry DNA. And then later that evening, the families came in and the students taught their families how to do that. And seeing the pride in their faces, it was like seeing their dreams unfold, right? You come to this country, you have dreams, you always want better for your kids, and then you see them in these leadership roles, and you see them teaching you how to do things you didn't know how to do. And we also had a chance to answer questions for them about what graduate school is, what it's like all the way over in Seattle across, across I-90. And we did it in English and in Spanish. Very straightforward, simple things for us, but so impactful and so different from what they'd experienced. And we had an undergraduate who had come with us, and on the car ride home, she was just effusive. She was gushing about how validated she felt being with a bunch of other graduate students further along in their education who also had some shared identities and some shared values. She talked about the power of being able to talk about science in Spanish and what that meant to her. And I just knew in that moment, like, we get to take up space differently, and it matters. Science is a cultural endeavor. No matter where you're from, the way that you ask questions, the way that you interpret data, the way that you make explanations of the world, the way that you approach solving natural problems, you bring all of your cultural lenses to that. And it matters. It matters that we're there, and it matters that we bring our culture into the ways that we're thinking about science and art and mathematics and technology. So I don't do scientific research anymore. And UW-Tacoma keeps promoting me for making waves, which I'm all about. And I actually have a great husband now who fully loves the unfiltered, full version of me. And my life is now filled with these rich relationships and really meaningful, purposeful work where I get to take up space differently in the academy. Like when my mom introduces me and she's like, "Senior Director." Something neither one of us saw coming ever. It matters, and I really think that the summary of my experiences and why I'm so centered on relationship is really captured in the tattoo that's on my wrist, if you ever have a chance to see this. Oh, that's me. But on my wrist, I have a muscle, and on the muscle, it shows some threads that are coming off of it. There we go. So mussels live in these really harsh environments where there's tons of really big, heavy waves that can knock them off of a rock at any point in time. But they have these incredibly strong attachments that they create to their home and to each other. And through that, they're able to survive these storms and these large waves. And when you get enough of them together, they actually change the dynamics and the physics of the area they're in, and they make space for other things to be able to survive and to live and to thrive. And so what I have learned in my journey and why I transitioned from applied science into a different and complementary line of work is because I really experienced what it is to believe in the power and the beauty of my true self.
Thank you, Amanda.